ILLARI is an incredibly powerful and aggressive support that has maintained her spot in the meta through time, so using my top 500 knowledge, let's learn how you can carry more games on your favorite support. Let's start off with the basics of each ability and work up to the advanced ideas, and then discuss how she fits into every game, starting with her primary weapon, the solar rifle. Bound to left click by default, ILLARI shoots hit scan blasts of solar light at her enemies that deal damage based on how long it was charged. It takes 1 second to fully charge the blaster. At max charge with no fall off, it deals 75 damage to the body, with a minimum charge with no fall off dealing 25 damage. Speaking of fall off, it starts occurring at 30 meters away and ends its effects at 50 meters. It is important to note that the charge rate is paused when healing allies or when using your melee. That being said, in most situations you should be looking to fully charge your rifle before blasting opponents. However, it is important to understand the situation and the target you are going against. For example, if you are going against a tracer, understand that she only has 150 health. That means with no healing, 2 shots to the body will kill her. However, if you manage to hit a headshot on your first shot dealing 112 damage, you can get away with finishing her off with a melee and a low charge shot to the body. There are a lot of combos possible when mixed with her shift as well, so get creative and understand that you can finish targets off in a pinch in niche situations if you need to. That being said though, sometimes hitting the tracer with a headshot is all you need to do. After taking that much damage, the tracer will be forced to recall or kite out, which effectively takes her out of the fight for a few seconds, giving you the opportunity to take an off angle and find a pick. If you have ever played games like Apex or any other battle royale for that matter, this is like the concept of breaking someone's armor. You haven't killed them, but you have put them in a severe disadvantage that gives you the opportunity to take advantage of the situation and win. Effectively killing people on ILLARI is really easy with how much damage you do, so don't get too attached to the dopamine hit you get when your picture pops up on the kill feed, and stay locked in to win with your advantage. Moving on to the healing her rifle provides, bound by right click by default, ILLARI can shoot a consistent beam of light that heals friendlies for 105 per second. It doesn't have the craziest range, so it needs to be used in close proximity to your team. It is also important to understand that it can only be used for 3 seconds until it runs out of energy. You'll want to make sure that you will always leave a little bit of charge left over, however, because if it completely depletes, it actually takes longer to recharge. By controlling this overheat mechanic, you can make sure that you have a little bit of healing left over at all times for some clutch moments. While ILLARI's healing is really strong, it is not what makes her different than other supports though. Even though you need to be close to your team to heal, you really want to look for moments in the fight that you can deviate from your team and get damage on squishy targets that are weak to finish them off. More often than not, you're actually going to be looking to damage instead of heal. And because of her mobility and survivability, this makes her different from Zen. Where Zen might want to take the time to break the shield in the front line, ILLARI wants to find a way around it to deal some quick damage in duels. This will be covered deeper in the positioning portion of the video. That being said, it is really important that you are confident in your mechanical abilities, so make sure you warm up and practice before you log into ranked on ILLARI. Your teammates will thank you. The best way to do this is to go into Vaxta, VAXTA, and shoot bots on hard mode for 15 to 30 minutes a day. That is what got me up to speed with other players when I first switched to PC, and I do this before every game when I compete. You'll see the difference in a week's time, I promise. Moving on from her rifle though, let's talk about the ability bound to shift by default, her Outburst. On a 7-second cooldown, ILLARI projects herself into the air in the direction she is facing. The capabilities of movement with this ability can get complicated based on where you are, which we will get into momentarily. On top of the movement, it deals 10 damage to those that are caught in an 8.5 meter radius around her, which can help when dealing damage combos to enemies. The biggest misconception players have about this ability though is that it heals you and allies, which it does not. This ability has nothing in common with Baptiste's burst and should not be used that way. With that out of the way though, let's discuss the deeper parts of this ability. Different situations call for different uses of the ability. Sometimes you want to launch yourself low to the ground to create horizontal distance, while on other maps, you want to do the opposite and launch yourself into the air to create vertical distance. For example, you should save this ability when an enemy Orisa or Bastion has their ultimates, as you can use the ability to escape from situations they can put you within using horizontal movement. Against characters like Winston, this can be used once he jumps jumps on you to push him off of your high ground and create distance to buy time. Sometimes, however, you really need to get away from a Reinhardt and wants to get to a hard to reach high ground. If you let go of your movement keys and hold on to the spacebar, you can maximize the height you get out of the ability to reach some high grounds that are otherwise just barely out of reach. You can also use it in combination with the payload or the environment to get to different places. On King's Row, the payload constantly gives you opportunities to take advantage of different positions to find weak targets in the backline to take them out quickly with your rifle. It should also always be used before you use your ultimate, as it will let you swing faster, giving the enemy less time to react and counter you before you shoot. There are still many uses we didn't touch on today, so get creative. This ability calls for it, and you will be getting better faster if you try different things. Moving on, we talk about Illari's most important ability, the healing Pylon. Upon using the ability, Illari throws a deployable turret that sticks to any surface that heals allies within its range and line of sight for 38 healing per second. It has a health of 100, half made up of 50 shields. The big thing to understand about the turret is that it does not break unless broken by you or an enemy, which affects its cooldown time. If an enemy damages your turret before you break it yourself, it goes on a 15-second cooldown as opposed to an 8-second cooldown. Because of this, it is important that you understand how perspective works in Overwatch, as the turret is incredibly tall. While a turret may look safe from your angle, try to visualize what the other team will see from their angle and what they are pushing from.
I think it's easier to teach perception from a less professional and recorded POV. So if we look at that turret was completely covered by two walls, and it looked pretty safe from our angle, but we have to understand that the turret is very long. So look, if I was like a Cassidy or a soldier, this is very easy to shoot down. So what you have to understand is, even though this looks like it's covered by two walls, sometimes it's better to put it on a farther edge that looks like it's jutting out more to that angle, because you have information that the team is coming this way. Because look how much harder it is for a hit scan to shoot this here. They have to swing pretty hard in order to shoot that turret. You want to think about where the enemy's actually coming from, because obviously this wouldn't be very good if a team was going to come from this angle. That's so far out in the open. But it's not great to put it in the middle, because you can just put it over here. It gets even more cover. You're always going to have this info no matter what map you're on, so you might as well use it to your advantage and think about what your enemies can see so you have the most effective healing pylons.
Aside from the niche mechanics of the ability, however, how are you supposed to actually use it? There are multiple uses depending on the situation. Because you want to be more aggressive and take angles, you can use the turret to bolster your threat on the flank to make you tankier in the 1v1s. This should be used if you see the enemy is commonly turning to take you off of the angles as you take them, or if you want to squeeze the engagement just enough to find a pick. If the enemies are not paying much attention to you, you can leave your turret with your team to give them the extra sustainability while you are taking your angle. You might also want to give the turret to your other support if they're playing characters like Baptiste or Moira, for example, and they already used their self-healing abilities early in the fight, not having them online anymore. You can alleviate the problems of this mistake by using your turret to rotate healing over to them. Overall, the first step is about understanding where fights are going to go before they happen and rotating the turret effectively to keep the cooldown time low or non-existent. Once you learn this part of the kit, then you can start thinking about the situations you could use a defensive turret as opposed to an aggressive turret, which is going to depend on the map, the compositions, and ultimately the situation. Now that her normal abilities are out of the way though, let's talk about her ultimate, Captive Sun. Upon charging the ultimate, Illari gains the ability to fly in the air for about 5 seconds and shoots out a ginormous projectile that applies a Sunstruck debuff on all enemies that are impacted. Targets that are Sunstruck move 40% slower and explode the debuff off if they take 90 damage from other sources, causing them to take an additional 120 to themselves and 50 to those that are directly nearby. So think of this. I get hit by the ult, I have the debuff that slows me down, Illari headshots me, I explode, and now I am down quite a bit of health. The optimal use of the ultimate is to try and get as many people caught in it as possible, which is typically when they are in rotation to the point, but when you recognize that this is very unrealistic, it is okay to isolate a target or two if needed. Why is it so hard to use optimally though? Well, because the projectile is so massive, it is also really easy to block with shields, eat with Diva, or completely destroy with Orisa. Not to mention that it also gets completely countered by Kiriko's Suzu and some other niche abilities. The other problem players run into is that you are not invincible in the ultimate either. You don't move as fast as Mercy and Valk, so don't fly to the skybox. Balance the proposition of finding an aggressive angle with keeping yourself alive. Not to mention, if you get stunned or hacked, your ultimate will also immediately be cancelled. The biggest tip I can give to a new Illari player is that you should use this ultimate frequently. Similar to Baptiste's window, it only costs 2,420 points to generate, and when you take into account just how much healing and damage you can do if you play Illari efficiently, she can easily get an ultimate every 2 fights. It is okay to target a person that is out in the open if it means you can guarantee a pick, as this is its most common use, but understand that you can hit an entire enemy team in rotation. That is preferred. Just don't get it Suzu'd. Now that we have finished talking about Illari's full kit though, let's discuss how she fits into the deeper levels of the game through understanding win conditions. A win condition is a way in which a team can win a team fight. Obviously, there are many different possible win conditions for each and every team fight, but there are some that are just more effective and efficient than others. That is, there are ways to win a fight by using a minimal amount of ultimates to get the maximum value needed. So let's talk about 2 compositions where Illari could be played, powerful win conditions within the compositions themselves, and how the win conditions interact with different compositions. The first composition we will talk about is the common variation of the Sigma composition we have seen in the World Cup recently, including Sigma, Bastion, Mei, Baptiste, and Illari. In this composition, Illari is on her own when looking to take off angles. Typically, this variant goes against the more common Baptiste and Lucio variant, so the Illari has to be very confident in her abilities to offset the value they would get out of running a Lucio for the team instead. That being said, if you are just going to shoot the shield all game, you should just be on Zenyatta. So remember, off angle and find ways to pressure the enemy. In the mirror, forcing off the enemy Illari first so that you can try and force out the enemy immortality field is how you are going to carry on Illari. Aside from that, this is a very much macro-based composition. Who hit the better wall? Which Sigma still has hands online to soak up the Bastion's barrage of bullets? When ultimates come out, Illari has much more influence though. If you can force out the enemy immortality field, your Sigma gets a relatively free flux. It all comes down to you being able to take an off angle, force out cooldowns, and maybe find a pick every fight, and then use your Outburst to get out. Just make sure that your ultimate doesn't get blocked or eaten by the Sigma. Another composition utilizes characters that were strong in a previous meta, including Orisa, Tracer, Soldier, Baptiste, and Illari. In this composition, the Illari now enables the Soldier to take the off angle with her to create more opportunities for attack. If you played Overwatch 1, this plays similarly to Double Shield, where the Sigma would take an off angle with the Zen and Ashe, just swap the characters behind the shield and take the second shield away. In the mirror, the style is similar. Which off angle melts the enemy core faster, or which duo deletes the other duo faster. Then you can take the fight from there. Because of this, the turret is used for the Soldier and Illari more so than a defensive turret for the team, since Baptiste can deal with the other two on his own due to his insanely consistent output. Window can be comboed with Soldier's Visor whenever it is possible, but it is not necessarily required, as sometimes it can be hard to line up. Outside of that, the big thing to understand is that Orisa can javelin away the ultimate, so this is an extra step to think about. Now let's see how both of these individual compositions react against each other. In the Sigma composition, they are much more dependent on winning the fight in the front line with the wall. If the wall is not good or isn't followed up upon, the enemy will get enough time to leverage the advantage of having an off angle for increased damage. The way you will win in this situation is by keeping the off angle at bay by doing damage to slow them down, while also looking to force out the enemy's immortality field. You can also deal damage to the enemy Bastion if he finds himself in a suboptimal position. In terms of ultimates, the Blizzard from Mei allows for more aggressive frontline pressure, so there is no reason the frontline should not crumble from all of the pressure. Your ultimate still gets blocked by Orisa, so using it to pressure out the off angle is respectable at times too. On the flip side of the matchup, the pressure is on you and the Soldier to get the job done. Since it is only a matter of time until your core falls over, you have to be fast with your angle and start pressuring the enemy immediately. If you can deal enough damage before the fight breaks out to the enemy so that your core has the advantage against theirs, you'll find yourself consistently winning fights. This is more difficult to do on some maps compared to others, for example King's Row compared to New Queen Street or Circuit Royale, but it is still worth discussing for when you want to bring it out. In terms of ultimates, you have to be more careful with your captive Sun, as the enemy will likely be more stacked on top of each other, giving the Orisa an easier time to block it with her spinning javelin. The enemy Illari's ult will likely target you, but this can be mitigated by shooting her right when she takes her angle to limit the amount of ultimate charge she gets out of each shot, slowing down her charge rate. Aside from that, every other ultimate is pretty much self-explanatory and doesn't offer any combo play outside of Orisa's Terra Surge. It can be for yours too if you charge it fast enough, but again, be mindful of getting it blocked. With the way that Illari is right now, she can feel still very one-dimensional. She is the support that takes angles aggressively to get picks or take cooldowns off the board early. That is the truth of her character. The reason why she is played so much is that she is just so damn good at it. So new styles of play for her haven't even developed yet. So let's develop our understanding of Illari through studying her positioning. Recall earlier how we discussed that Illari needs to take angles in order to be effective. A lot of the positioning around Illari can be understood through comprehension of what she brings to the table. Unlike Zenyatta, she does not have a lot of consistent damage over time. Instead, she does a lot of damage in short bursts of effectiveness. Because of this, her first option should never be to shoot an enemy shield. She always wants to get that damage on a better target, like a support in the backline, a DPS in a duel, or hell, on an immortality field, Torb turret, or Illari pylon. Because of this, you have to understand that she rarely wants to be stacked right on top of her team, and that is why she is not super great with rush characters like Reaper and Lucio, because she needs time to get the job done. She needs time to take an angle and be effective or force attention onto her. Because of this, she feels a lot more like a DPS that happens to heal rather than a support that happens to DPS. And you should understand this while you play her. If you aren't taking angles and would rather just be doing raw damage, or maybe your aim isn't the most on point, that is where Zenyatta shines currently in the meta. Speaking of the meta, what characters does Illari synergize with the best? This should be pretty straightforward after discussing the positioning part of the video, but for tank, Sigma is a great pick to pair along with her right now. He's pretty self-sufficient and doesn't mind just hanging out on an angle, poking the enemy for a while. Other tanks that could be pretty decent with her when they come back into the meta include some ball compositions or even Hog. These characters have the same identities of wanting to just take multiple angles and focus on enemies rather than utility and shields. The problem is the other characters are just so much stronger right now that Illari gets forced into those compositions due to just sheer numbers. In terms of DPS, this one is really open-ended. Soldier 76 and other hit scans can be helpful if you want to create consistent pressure from an angle, but if you want to duo in lower elos with a Tracer or Genji player, you could easily soften up the supports in the backline for some easy cleanup for your DPS. So long as both you and your duo understand the strategy before you start playing, you are doing better than 99% of players, oddly enough. Lastly, the best support duo by far for Illari is Baptiste. Whether that is because they are actually good together or that Baptiste is just plain crazy with what is good right now is up for debate. For what you lack in AoE healing, he makes up for, and he also packs a consistent punch as well. If you're going for a ball comp though, I could see characters like Zenyatta or Ana being pretty decent, but that might be a bit of a stretch. At the end of the day though, make sure that you always think about what your composition's win condition is in order to pick the best fit for every single game. And with that, the guide comes to an end, but let's finish it all off with some key takeaways. For beginners, focus on grasping the kit of Illari. While the concepts might be pretty simple, watch your VODs back and make sure that your turrets are getting rotated around effectively and aren't jutting outside of cover more than they need to. Also, spend this time going into Vaxa and perfecting your aim to really take advantage of her strengths as a character. For intermediate players, look at the characters you are surrounded by and begin to understand when people need the extra healing and when you can deviate and look for an off angle every single fight. Different compositions create various conditions to look for, and it is very important to understand them. For advanced players, test your limits on Illari. When you start getting really good with Illari, you can start trading off your teammates' lives for 2 of the enemies if you can get accurate enough. Furthermore, you can also make sure that your cooldowns are used perfectly to get your ultimate faster and carry more games as a result. And with that, we have officially reached the end of today's Illari guide. Practice makes perfect, and learning every hero within Overwatch. Be sure to watch Illari players to apply things that you have learned throughout the guide today. So many streamers have been using this character to dominate lobbies, but if you really want a pro player to look out for, I would suggest watching the World Cup, with Ultraviolet being my personal favorite. I also do VOD reviews over on Fiverr, as well as post additional educational content on Patreon if any of that interests you. All of these links will be found in the description. If you have learned anything from today's guide, please do like, share, and subscribe, as it helps the channel out a ton. But until next time, I've got to peace out and pass out. I'll see you in the next one.